"You are not a patient anymore, Mr. Mercer. You are hospital property." The words appeared in clean white letters across Jack Mercer's chart, while 6 nurses stood outside room 417 pretending not to stare. Dr. Leora Vin read the line twice, certain the translation system had failed. It had not. Inside the room, Jack sat upright against a thin pillow, looking more annoyed by the cold coffee in his hand than by the fact that every monitor around him was flashing contradictory numbers. His heart rate showed 42 beats per minute, then 88, then nothing at all. Yet he remained awake, breathing slowly, his gray eyes following the movement beyond the glass. Leora turned toward Rachel Cole, the human charge nurse, standing beside her. "Why is every nurse checking on him?" Rachel did not answer immediately. She watched Nemi enter the room carrying a fresh blanket Jack had never requested. 5 minutes earlier, another nurse had replaced a perfectly functional oxygen sensor. Before that, someone from the pediatric wing had brought him black coffee from the employee lounge, 2 floors away. "They are doing their jobs," Rachel said. "None of them are assigned to this patient." "Then maybe they are doing somebody else's job." Leora's jaw tightened. Cellari hospitals ran on precision. Every medication, every visit, every spoken instruction had a purpose. Humans treated medical wards like family kitchens. They wandered in, traded jokes, brought food, and touched patients without first consulting 3 layers of protocol. Usually, Leora found it inefficient. Today, it felt coordinated. She entered room 417. Jack looked up from his cup. He was 38, broad-shouldered, pale from 3 days under artificial light, with short brown hair that refused to lie flat. A faint line of dried blood marked one nostril, though his official chart listed no bleeding. "Doctor," he said, "you look like somebody just canceled Christmas. Your condition is unstable." "That is not what the chart says. Your chart also says you have been discharged." Jack glanced at the locked door. "That seems optimistic." Nemi adjusted the blanket over his legs, then slipped her lower right hand beneath the fabric. The movement lasted less than a second. Leora almost missed it. Jack did not react until Nemi stepped away. Then his fingers closed around something hidden in his palm. Leora heard footsteps approaching in the hall. For hospital security officers turned the corner, followed by Administrator Corvin Hale in his charcoal suit. Hale always smiled as if delivering good news, even when closing a ward or cutting staff. Rachel saw him and went still. Jack unfolded the object beneath the blanket. It was a narrow strip of paper, handwritten in blue ink. Humans still trusted paper when they believed machines were listening. His eyes moved across the message once. "Do not let them move you downstairs." Hale stopped outside the room. "Dr. Vin, thank you for stabilizing Mr. Mercer. The research division will take over from here. He is my patient." "Not anymore." The door unlocked with a soft click. Every nurse in the hallway turned toward it at the same time. Jack looked at Leora, then at Rachel, then at the officers waiting beyond the glass. His voice stayed calm. "Doc, I think you should ask your question again." Leora looked back at the nurses surrounding room 417. None of them appeared frightened. They looked ready. And for the first time, she understood that they had not been checking on Jack Mercer. They had been making sure he was never alone. 3 days earlier, Jack Mercer was 40 feet inside Meridian Station's oxygen processing spine when the warning lights came on. He was lying beneath a scrubber manifold with a wrench in one hand and a paper cup of bad coffee balanced beside his boot. "That better be a sensor fault," he muttered. His headset answered with Rachel Cole's voice. "You say that every time an alarm goes off. Most alarms are machines asking for attention. And this one?" Jack looked at the pressure gauge. The needle was climbing fast. "This one sounds serious." He rolled out from beneath the manifold and reached for the emergency panel. The main display showed a coolant imbalance in processing chamber 6, followed by a worker location alert. One person was still inside. "Nemi Tao." Jack keyed his radio. "Nemi, answer me." Static. Then a frightened voice broke through. "The inner door will not open." Jack was already moving. "Stay away from the coolant lines." "I am coming." Rachel cut in. "Jack, the chamber seals in 90 seconds. Let station security handle it. Security is 4 minutes away. Then wait for them." Jack reached the locked access door and pulled off the control plate. "Tell Nemi I am waiting." He crossed 2 wires, reset the magnetic lock, and forced the door open 6 inches. Cold vapor spilled through the gap. Nemi stood on the other side, all four hands pressed against the inner release. Her wide violet eyes fixed on him. The system says contamination is present. The system also thinks the coffee upstairs is drinkable. Come on. He widened the gap enough for her to slip through. A deep metallic thump rolled through the chamber. Every light changed from amber to red. Jack saw the coolant conduit flex near the ceiling. Run. Nemi froze. Jack grabbed the back of her work vest and pushed her toward the outer corridor. The conduit ruptured behind them, releasing a cloud of pale blue vapor that moved with unnatural speed. Jack shoved Nemi through the emergency door and hit the manual seal. The barrier dropped between them, but not before the vapor reached him. His lungs locked. His knees nearly gave out. Through the small window, Nemi struck the glass with all four palms while Rachel shouted through his headset. Jack, stay where you are. Medical is coming. He pressed one hand against the wall and forced himself upright. Nemi clear. She is safe. Good. He took one step, then another. The corridor tilted beneath him. His chest felt tight, but there was no sharp pain, only a strange cold spreading under his skin. He made it nearly 200 feet before Rachel reached him with a medical team. She caught his arm as he stumbled. You are going to the hospital. I have a shift report due. Jack. Fine, but I am not paying for the ambulance. Rachel guided him onto the transport chair, trying not to show how frightened she was. Over her shoulder, Jack saw Administrator Corbin Hale enter the damaged chamber with two Helix researchers. Hale did not look at the broken conduit. He looked at the disabled warning panel. Then he quietly removed a data module from inside it. Jack watched him slip it into his coat. A second later, the corridor lights flickered, and every record of the alarm vanished from the station network. By the time Jack reached Meridian Medical, his breathing had steadied enough to annoy everyone around him. I can walk, he told Rachel as two orderlies guided the transport chair through the intake doors. You nearly passed out in a maintenance tunnel. Nearly is doing a lot of work in that sentence. Rachel ignored him and handed his access badge to the admissions nurse. Dr. Leora then met them inside Trauma Bay 4, her silver-blue skin reflecting the cold overhead lights. She scanned Jack once, then looked at the readings above his chair. Blood oxygen is 81%. Jack glanced at the display. That sounds low. It is dangerously low. I was hoping for moderately inconvenient. Leora placed a sensor against his chest. The device chirped, recalibrated, then chirped again. His pulse registered at 44 beats per minute, jumped to 92, then disappeared. Jack remained conscious. Hold still, she said. I am holding still. Your internal readings are not. Rachel helped him onto the examination bed, while Leora ordered a full toxicology panel. Jack looked toward the glass wall. Nemi stood outside with all four hands wrapped around a cup she had forgotten to drink. He raised two fingers to let her know he was all right. Nemi did not look convinced. The first blood sample returned in 6 minutes. Rachel opened the report and stopped speaking. Leora noticed. What is it? Rachel turned the screen. Jack's cells were producing a protein structure neither of them recognized. The pattern shifted as they watched, folding and unfolding around traces of the blue coolant compound, as though testing different ways to break it apart. Is that good? Jack asked. Leora leaned closer. It should not be possible. That was not the question. Before she could answer, the screen went blank. A replacement message appeared. Sample corrupted. Automatic disposal authorized. Rachel frowned. That sample was clean. She opened the raw diagnostic archive. Empty. Run it again, Leora said. The second sample produced the same result. New proteins. Rapid cellular repair. Abnormal thermal regulation. Then the file vanished. Rachel unplugged the scanner from the station network and tried a third time using local memory. Jack watched her expression tighten. You have that look. What look? The one people get right before they tell me not to worry. Rachel removed the data card before the system could erase it. I am not telling you that. An alarm sounded near the door. Not a medical alarm. A security alert. Administrator Hale's voice came over the intercom, calm and polished. Trauma Bay 4 is now under restricted access. All personnel will surrender diagnostic materials to Helix Research. Leora moved between Jack and the entrance. He is under my care. The door locked from the outside. Rachel slipped the data card into her shoe. Jack sat up slowly. His hospital gown was damp with sweat, but the color had returned to his face. Doctor, he said, looking past her at the dark observation window. How many people are watching this room? Leora checked the internal system. 6 camera feeds were active. None belonged to the hospital. Then the disconnected scanner beeped in Rachel's hand. A new reading appeared. Jack's damaged lung tissue was repairing itself in real time. Beneath it, a second message flashed for less than a second before disappearing. Helix subject response confirmed. Rachel looked at Leora. This was not an accident. On the other side of the locked door, someone began entering the security override code. The override code reached its final digit, and Jack was already off the examination bed. The door slid open just far enough for 2 Helix security officers to step through, both wearing gray restraint harnesses and carrying compact stun batons. "Remain where you are," the first officer said. Jack looked at Rachel, then at Leora. "You heard him. Stay where you are." The officer moved toward Jack. Jack shifted one step to the side, caught the man's wrist, and redirected the baton into the wall panel. Blue light snapped across the controls, cutting power to the door. The second officer reached for Jack, but Rachel shoved a rolling supply cart between them. It struck the officer's knees and forced him backward into the hall. Leora slapped the emergency seal. The door closed with both men outside. For 1 second, nobody spoke. Jack looked at Rachel. "You keep that cart around for medical reasons?" "Mostly." Hale's voice came through the ceiling speaker. "This is becoming unnecessarily dramatic." Leora stepped beneath it. "You locked armed personnel inside a trauma bay with an injured patient. Mr. Mercer is no longer injured. That does not make him yours." Hale paused. "Doctor, open the secure archive on your console. Then you can decide whether you still feel that way." A file appeared on Leora's screen under a black Helix authorization seal. She hesitated before opening it. 17 names filled the display. All human workers. All admitted after industrial accidents involving experimental compounds. All transferred to restricted care. Every record ended with the same phrase. "Biological response incomplete." Jack read over her shoulder. "Where are they now?" Hale answered through the speaker. "Their contributions advanced research that will eventually protect millions." Rachel's face hardened. That was not his question. Leora opened the oldest file. A maintenance worker from Ohio. Then a cargo pilot from Arizona. A schoolteacher traveling through Meridian with her family. None had signed consent forms. Their transfer orders carried Hale's personal authorization. "You used them," Leora said. "We learned from them," Hale replied. Humanity entered interstellar space with bodies designed for one planet. Radiation, pressure loss, foreign pathogens, unstable gravity. Adaptation is not cruelty. It is survival. Jack kept his voice level. "Did they agree to survive your way?" Silence answered him. Then another door at the rear of the trauma bay unlocked. A Helix researcher stepped in, tall and narrow, with copper-colored skin and 4 dark eyes. Dr. Keth Arden carried no weapon. He held a medical injector and wore the patient smile of someone who expected obedience. "Mr. Mercer, your cellular response is unique," Keth said. "You are the first subject to remain cognitively stable. That's supposed to be flattering? It is historic." Keth raised the injector. "This will make transport easier." Jack moved before Keth finished the sentence. He caught the researcher's forearm, turned him toward the empty bed, and pressed the injector into the mattress. The device discharged with a soft hiss. Jack released him without striking him. "You should work on your bedside manner." Keth stumbled back, more shocked than hurt. Rachel grabbed the portable scanner while Leora opened the service exit behind the equipment cabinet. "This passage connects to the lower diagnostic corridor," Leora said. "It also leads toward Helix." Jack looked at the 17 names still glowing on the screen. "Then, that is where we are going." Hale's voice returned, colder now. "If you enter that ward, you will not like what you find." Jack stepped into the dark passage. "I already do not like what I found up here." Behind them, the main door began to buckle under another security override. Ahead, somewhere beneath the hospital, a row of hidden life support monitors suddenly powered on. The service passage narrowed as Jack, Rachel, and Leora moved deeper beneath Meridian Medical. Pipes ran along the ceiling, warm enough to fog the thin metal walls, and every few yards a maintenance light blinked on before dimming behind them. Jack kept one hand against the railing. He was walking steadily, but Rachel noticed the way he measured each breath. "You need to slow down," she said. "I am walking." "That is not the same thing." Leora checked the portable scanner while keeping pace. His oxygen level is dropping again. Jack looked at the dark corridor ahead. Then let us make this quick. The passage ended at a sealed junction marked for ventilation access only. Leora entered her credentials. Access denied. Rachel tried her nursing override. Access denied. Then the entire hallway went silent. The ventilation fan stopped. The temperature began to rise. Hale's voice came through a hidden speaker. Return to Trauma Bay 4, and I will restore environmental control. Rachel stared at the ceiling. You shut off the air in a hospital corridor? I isolated a restricted research route. There are patients below us. There are assets below you. Jack looked at Leora. How long before the air gets bad? For us, perhaps 8 minutes. Her eyes moved to him. For you, I do not know. Jack crouched beside the access panel and removed the outer plate with his fingers. That makes 2 of us. He studied the wires, then pulled a small multi-tool from his work pants. Rachel gave him a look. You wore that into the hospital? I get nervous without pockets. His hands moved quickly. Years of fixing scrubbers and pressure doors had taught him which systems were actually complicated and which only wanted people to believe they were. The lock clicked open after 20 seconds. Beyond it was not another corridor. It was a control room. 3 nurses were already inside. One was adjusting the ventilation map. Another was copying patient files onto a portable drive. Nemi stood at the center console, all 4 hands moving across separate controls. Jack blinked. How did you get down here? Freight elevator, Nemi said. It has a maintenance override you repaired last winter. Rachel looked around. You all planned this? Not exactly, said Nurse Daniel Price from oncology. We noticed records disappearing. Then Rachel started asking questions. A soft chime sounded from the ventilation board. Someone on another floor had restored airflow to their corridor. Another light appeared, then another. Nurses across Meridian were quietly taking control of local systems. Leora watched the map fill with green signals. How many people are involved? Rachel checked her communicator. More than Hale thinks. Jack leaned against the console as fresh air returned. His face had gone pale, but his breathing slowed instead of worsening. Leora raised the scanner. His metabolism was falling into a pattern she had never seen, conserving oxygen with precise, automatic control. Your body is changing again, she said. Is that the good news? I'm not sure there is good news. The room lights flickered red. Hill had found them. Security shutters began closing across every route to the lower ward. Nemi pointed to the floor plan. There is one path still open. A narrow line led straight to Helix. Rachel zoomed in and froze. 23 life signs appeared beneath the hospital, all labeled inactive. Jack straightened. Inactive people do not have heartbeats. Then the green signals on the map vanished one by one. Hale was cutting the nurses out of the system. Before the last connection died, a final message appeared from an unknown terminal below. Please do not leave us here. Jack read the message once, then reached for the lower ward controls. Open the route. Nemi shook her head. Hale sealed every door between here and Helix. Then show me which door is weakest. Leora pulled up the structural map. A service bulkhead sat 60 feet down the east corridor, reinforced for pressure loss, but tied to an older mechanical release. That one, she said. But security will reach it first. As if summoned by her words, heavy footsteps sounded beyond the control room. Rachel killed the lights. Everyone went still. Jack tilted his head toward the wall. 6 officers. 2 coming from the west stairwell. 4 from the main passage. Leora stared at him. You can hear that. I can hear one of them breathing through a bad filter. Daniel Price looked toward the locked door. That is not comforting. Jack pointed to the ceiling access hatch. Get the nurses into the ventilation crawlspace. Rachel, take the drive. Nemi, keep trying to reach the people below. What about you? Rachel asked. I am going to make security look in the wrong direction. Before she could argue, the door control flashed green. Hale had remotely released it. The doors opened, but no officers entered. Instead, Administrator Hale stood alone in the corridor, hands visible, his expression calm. You are making decisions without all the facts, he said. Jack stepped between Hale and the others. You have 23 people locked under a hospital. 23 bodies, Hale replied. Most have no higher cognitive function left. Leora moved beside Jack. Then who sent the message? Hale looked at Nemi's console. An automated distress routine. Nothing more. Nemi's 4 hands hovered above the controls. It used current syntax. Hale ignored her and held up a small remote. Mr. Mercer, your body is adapting because Helix was designed from human biology. The compound did not choose you by chance. It recognized a compatible genetic profile. Jack's face remained still, but Rachel saw his hand tighten at his side. Hale continued. Your father participated in the first Helix trials 18 years ago. The room seemed to shrink. Jack looked at him. My father died from heart failure. That is what your family was told. Hale activated the wall display. A medical image appeared, showing a man with Jack's eyes lying inside a Helix chamber. The date was 2 weeks after his supposed death. Your father survived longer than any subject before you, Hale said. His cells formed the foundation of the compound in your bloodstream. Jack stared at the image without speaking. Rachel took 1 step toward him, then stopped. He did not need comfort yet. He needed the truth. Where is he? Jack asked. Hale's voice softened. Downstairs. The floor trembled as security shutters opened across the eastern route. Every sealed door between the control room and Helix unlocked at once. I can take you to him, Hale said. But the nurses stay here. Leora looked at the map. The path was too easy. Hale wanted Jack below. Jack knew it too. You planned the leak, he said. I created an opportunity, Hale answered. I needed to know whether your father's adaptation could be inherited. Rachel stepped forward. Jack, do not go with him. A new signal appeared on Nemi's console. 1 heartbeat beneath the hospital accelerated, then settled into a rhythm identical to Jack's. A voice came through the speaker, weak but clear. Jack, if you can hear me, do not trust Hale. Hale's calm expression finally broke. He turned toward the console. Jack moved first, taking the remote from his hand and locking the control room door behind him. That sounded pretty cognitive to me. Warning lights flooded the corridor. Hale backed away as every Helix chamber below switched from standby to active. Leora checked the rising power levels and felt the color leave her face. He triggered a mass awakening. Hale looked toward the floor. No, he whispered. They did. Beneath them, 23 heartbeats began to rise together. The Helix elevator dropped so fast that Rachel had to brace herself against the wall. Jack stood in the center without holding anything, listening to the layered rhythm beneath their feet. 23 heartbeats. Some weak, some uneven. One matched his own almost perfectly. Hale remained locked in the control room above, but his voice followed them through the elevator speaker. You do not understand what is waking up down there. Jack looked at the ceiling. You had 18 years to understand it. The doors opened onto a corridor washed in dim blue light. Glass chambers lined both sides, each connected to thick bundles of tubing and old medical consoles. Inside were men and women of different ages, all human, all listed as dead in Meridian records. Some were awake. Others were only beginning to move. Leora stopped beside the nearest chamber. Their metabolic systems are synchronizing. With Jack? Rachel asked. Not only with him, with one another. At the far end of the ward, a man sat upright behind fogged glass. His hair was white now, his face thinner than the photograph Jack remembered, but the eyes were the same. Jack took 1 step forward. Dad, the man pressed a shaking hand to the glass. You got your mother's timing. Jack almost laughed, but the sound caught in his throat. For years he had rehearsed what he would say if he could speak to his father again. None of it survived the moment. They told us you were gone. Hale made sure of that. A security shutter slammed down between Jack and the chamber. Red lights swept across the ward. Keth Arden appeared on the upper observation deck, one hand resting on a control panel. The reunion will have to wait, he said. The subjects are unstable, and Mr. Mercer is amplifying them. Leora looked up. Open the chambers. If I do, their systems may collapse. Jack studied the locks. If you do not, Hale burns the ward. Keth's expression changed. How do you know about the purge? Because men like Hale always build a delete button. An alarm began counting down from 5 minutes. Rachel opened the portable drive and connected it to the chamber network. I can release them one at a time. Too slow, Leora said. Jack placed his palm against the nearest glass. The woman inside turned toward him, breathing hard. He could feel the vibration of her pulse through the chamber wall. Then every monitor in the ward shifted to the same rhythm. His rhythm. Keth stared at the data. That is impossible. Jack looked up at him. You keep saying that like it has helped you so far. The chamber locks clicked. Not one. All 23. Keth had not opened them. Neither had Rachel. The patients had overridden the system together. Doors slid apart along the entire ward, and the people Hale had declared empty stepped into the corridor, weak but aware. Jack's father moved last. He leaned on the chamber frame, then nodded toward the purge timer. You always were good with broken machinery. Jack glanced at the fire control panel across the ward. I learned from somebody. Before he could move, Keth activated a containment field that sealed the exits and isolated the controls behind an energy barrier. Nobody leaves, he said. Not until I know what you have become. Jack looked around at the frightened patients, the nurses beside him, and the father he had already lost once. Then he faced Keth. That is your mistake. You still think this is about what I became. 23 patients stepped closer, their monitors beating as one. It is about what you woke up. The purge timer dropped below 4 minutes as the containment field sealed the ward in a pale wall of light. Rachel tested the barrier with the portable scanner and pulled back when the display overloaded. That field is tied directly to the station reactor, she said. We cannot shut it down from here. Keth watched from the observation deck, trying to recover his confidence. You will remain contained until the medical authority arrives. Jack's father gave a tired laugh. Corvin Hale is the medical authority. Leora turned toward him. What did Hale do to you? The older man steadied himself against an empty chamber. Helix was supposed to help human bodies survive deep space. Radiation, thin air, foreign disease. We volunteered because they promised monitored trials and full consent. His eyes moved to Keth. Then the results became valuable. Keth stepped closer to the glass above them. The program required continuity. You mean new subjects, Rachel said. We selected workers with compatible profiles, Keth replied. The accidents allowed treatment without public panic. Jack looked at the countdown. 3 minutes, 30 seconds. So the leak was staged, the alarms were erased, and Hale waited to see whether I lived. You were never in real danger, Keth said. Jack stared at him. You put Nemi in that chamber. Keth hesitated. That pause answered everything. Nemi's expression changed, not to fear, but anger. She moved to the nearest medical console and placed all 4 hands on its controls. The containment field uses patient monitoring as a safety circuit, she said. Leora understood first. If the system loses every life sign at once, it will assume a sensor failure and drop the field for emergency access. Rachel looked around at the 23 patients. Can they lower their readings together? Jack's father met his son's eyes. That is what we have been practicing for 18 years. The patients formed a loose circle. Their breathing slowed. One by one, the monitors dropped from normal ranges into near silence. Jack felt their rhythm through the floor, not fading, but changing. Their bodies were conserving everything, the same way his had survived without oxygen upstairs. Keth saw the readings and slammed his hand against the observation controls. Stop. You cannot know whether they will wake again. Jack stepped into the circle. Neither did you. He closed his eyes and matched his breathing to theirs. The ward became quiet except for the purge timer. 2 minutes. Every monitor went flat at the same moment. The containment field flickered. Then it vanished. Rachel rushed to the fire control station while Leora opened the emergency exits. Nemi sent the hidden patient files into Meridian's public medical network. Keth locked the observation deck, but the evidence was already moving through the hospital. Names, dates, false death reports, and Hale's authorization codes appeared on thousands of screens. Rachel, Jack said, opening his eyes. Can you stop the purge? She scanned the controls. Not from this terminal. Hale routed it through central administration. Jack's father pointed toward a maintenance shaft behind the chambers. That line reaches the hospital core. The countdown passed 90 seconds. Then every speaker in the ward activated. Hale's voice filled the room. You may have exposed Helix, but if those files leave Meridian, the entire station loses life support. Rachel stared at the network map. Hale had linked the broadcast to the oxygen grid. Cutting one would destroy the other. Keth smiled from behind the glass. Now you understand. The truth stays here, or everyone on this station pays for it. Jack studied the map, then looked at the nurses gathering across the hospital network. Hundreds of green lights had returned. No, he said quietly. Now he understands. Rachel followed his gaze. Every nurse on Meridian had begun copying the files through their own medical equipment, spreading the broadcast faster than hail could shut it down. At the same time, engineering crews were separating life support from central control. Hail had built one switch. The people of Meridian were turning the entire station into 1,000 smaller ones. The purge timer reached 60 seconds as the locked hospital doors began opening floor by floor. The purge timer reached 30 seconds, and Meridian Station did not panic. It organized. On the surgical floor, nurses switched ventilators to local power. In pediatrics, technicians moved every incubator onto independent batteries. In engineering, crews opened manual oxygen valves that had not been touched in 20 years. Hale had designed his thread around one belief: people would protect themselves first. He had never understood what happened when hundreds of ordinary people decided to protect each other instead. Rachel watched the network split into smaller systems, each one carrying a piece of the hospital and a copy of the Helix files. Life support is separated, she said. The broadcast is still moving. The timer reached 10. Jack stood beside his father while Leora guided the awakened patients toward the open elevators. At 5 seconds, the purge controls lost their connection to the station core. At 0, nothing happened. No alarms. No fire. Only the steady sound of air moving through the vents. For the first time in 18 years, the Helix ward doors remained open. Hale was found in central administration, sitting alone in front of a dead control panel. He did not resist when station security entered. Keth Arden surrendered after the medical staff refused every order he gave. By morning, the files had reached Earth, the Galactic Medical Council, and every major news service in the Orion trade network. The 17 missing workers were no longer statistics. They had names again. Families. Photographs. People waiting to hear voices they had believed were gone forever. Jack spent the next 3 weeks back in room 417. His body continued changing, though more slowly now. Some days his heart rate dropped so low that the monitors complained. Other days he could hear a cart rolling down the hall before anyone else noticed it. Leora stopped calling the readings impossible. She simply wrote them down. Jack's father stayed in the room across from him. They did not try to recover 18 lost years in one conversation. They talked about small things instead. Pittsburgh weather. Jack's mother. The old pickup truck his father had promised to fix and never had. It was not enough. It was a beginning. One artificial morning, Leora entered Jack's room and found Rachel checking his oxygen level while Nimi adjusted the coffee dispenser he had repaired for the nursing staff. Daniel Price stood in the doorway with a deck of cards. 2 more nurses waited in the hall. Leora looked around. "You are all off duty." Rachel smiled. "That has not stopped us before." Jack lifted his cup. "You finally understand them, Doc?" Leora considered the question. Helix studied human endurance as if it belonged to one body. They measured your lungs, your blood, your ability to adapt. She looked toward the busy hallway. They never measured this. Jack followed her gaze. Nurses moved from room to room, carrying medicine, food, bad jokes, and quiet reassurance. Humans and aliens worked side by side, checking on patients who had no one else and staying a few minutes longer with those who did. "Bodies are good at surviving," Jack said. "People are better at giving them a reason." Leora nodded slowly. She had spent her life believing strength meant needing less from others. Meridian had taught her the opposite. Real strength was noticing when someone was in trouble, walking through the door, and refusing to leave them alone. Outside the window, the station turned toward the distant light of Earth. Inside room 417, another nurse stepped in, carrying nothing important and offering no medical excuse. This time, no one asked why.